Thank you very much. In this section or segment, we're going to be talking about taking full responsibility for your own life, not only for your behavioral responses, but also for your emotional responses to life. That you've got to realize that they come from something in us. There's a story about this priest who wanted to check on the religion being taught in his grammar school soon in, and he asked the grade school children, who fit the Battle of Jericho? And nobody responded. So he pointed to a little kid in the first row whose name happened to be Johnny. And he said, his name began with J. He's thinking, of course, of Joshua. And the kid said, Father, I didn't do it, honest. And the priest turned to the nun in charge of the class and said, Sister, do you hear what this boy said? And Sister said, Father, Johnny's an honest boy. If he says he didn't do it, he didn't do it. So he went to the church council, and he said, I want to tell you what's being taught in our schools. And he told that story. And one of the counselees said, Father, let's just chalk it up to vandalism and let it go at that. I think of self-responsibility, of taking full responsibility for yourself, as being a second leg through which you walk through life. In the last segment, we talked about joyful self-acceptance, and now we're going to talk about joyful self-responsibility. These are the two legs I think a person needs to walk through life. And I think if I had a little child, I would drench that child's mind in both of these realities of self-worth and self-responsibility. I really think that's very important, because the opposite of a person who takes responsibility is a blamer. And blamers are just out of touch with reality, as we will see later. But I think that this is very important to take full responsibility in order to get to know yourself. Now, obviously, the first objection is, someone put these things in me, someone gave me these attitudes, and that's true. But now I am an adult. Now it's my moment to take responsibility for whatever has been done to me, whatever has been said to me, whatever ideas get up in my mind, whatever attitudes I have. It's up to me to change them. So taking full responsibility doesn't mean that I am responsible for what's in me, because as Lillian Roth once said, and I've quoted her, our lives are shaped by those who love us and by those who refuse to love us. So I think this is true, that others may have put things in me. I may be deformed as a result of previous experiences and so forth, but now I have to take full responsibility. And when some action or emotion comes out of me, I have to say, it comes from something in me. It does not come from whoever stimulated that response, whatever it be, behavioral or emotional. All right? It comes from something in me, but it's not a question of blaming. It's not a question of responsibility. It's not a question of blaming, either blaming my parents or blaming my experiences or blaming myself. It's just a question of saying it comes from something in me. One of my favorite stories is of a man named Sidney Harris, who wrote a column in the Chicago newspapers. It was syndicated, I believe, in various cities. But he went down to the newsstand with a friend who wanted to buy a newspaper. And the newsman was very mean. And the friend said, hello, Charlie, how are you? He said, Charlie, can I buy a paper? And he shoved the paper at him, and he gave him the payment for it. And he said, have a nice day now, Charlie. He said, don't tell me what kind of a day to have. I have other plans. And so when they leave, Sidney Harris says to his friend, excuse me, is that fellow always so mean? And the friend said, yes, unfortunately, he is. And he said, are you always so nice to him? He said, yes, I am. He said, why? He said, Sidney Harris said, that's what I was going to ask you. Why? Why, if he is always so mean, are you always so nice to him? And the friend had to think as though the answer were obvious. And finally he said, oh, because you see, I don't want him to decide how I'm going to act. I am an actor, not a reactor. And Sidney Harris walked away saying, whoa, this is one of the really big things in life to learn, how to be an actor, not a reactor. I decide if you call me names, I'm not going to call you names, you dirty little Dominican. I let you set the common denominator then of our behavior. You started calling me names, so I called you names. You lied to me, so I lied to you. I'm giving you a taste of your own medicine. Oh no. That's a sign of immaturity. I am responsible. I am a loving person. And what Jesus asks of us, will you be a loving person? Yeah, sure I will. So you might hate me, or you might lie about me, but I'm going to love you anyway. No matter what you do, I'm going to love you. I'm sorry. But that's who I am, and I'm going to decide. Now, it's a little more difficult to explain this to people in terms of emotional reactions. Can another person stimulate an emotion in you? Could another person make you mad? Could another person frighten you and so forth? Now, what I would like to suggest is that the other person cannot stimulate that precise emotional reaction in you unless that is already in you. Unless there is anger in you, no one can make you angry. Unless there's fear in you, no one can make you afraid. Do you know, this is true, there are some people who can't get angry. They're just emotionally unable to get angry. There are some people who can't be other things. And so when you say, oh, well, anyone would have been, the answer is no, not anyone. You were, but not anyone. Now, what I would like to suggest is that we take full responsibility for our emotions. When I'm teaching this in class, I asked the first boy or girl in class, the first row, how do you think I would feel if someone walked out of this classroom now stomping their foot and saying, I want my tuition back. This is a lot of snake oil. I'm not going to listen to this. How do you think I would feel? And the first person usually says, oh, you'd be angry. Hey, kid, I got your Social Security number, and you're going to pay through the nose for this. And I said, well, maybe I would feel that way. How do you think I would feel? And the second person said, no, I don't think I'd feel angry. I think you would feel guilty. Would you please come back? I knew I'd make a mistake, but I didn't think I'd make it this soon. Give me another chance, please. You would interiorize all the responsibility for yourself, for my walking out. And the third person says, no, I don't think so. I think you'd be compassionate. Poor kid wasn't ready for this. That's too bad, isn't it? But he wasn't ready. I feel sorry for him. And so they name a number of emotions. What I think they are doing is projecting how they would react to someone walking out on them. I tell them at the end, when someone walks out on me, I always think they're going to the bathroom. So it doesn't really bother me. But if someone did walk out demanding their tuition back and saying there's a lot of snake oil and so forth, I don't know how I would react. Because I've never faced that particular problem yet. But I presume I would react in one of the ways emotionally that you have suggested. I'd either be angry, or I'd be guilty, or I'd be compassionate, or I'd be something. But I don't know. Until that person does walk out, I won't know. But if you did walk out and I did react emotionally, what I would know is this comes out of something in me. It really does come out of something in me. It doesn't come out of you. You can stimulate a reaction, but you can't stimulate a specific reaction. In other words, I might react compassionately to you. You're not ready for this. Or I might react angrily or guiltily, but the anger, the guilt, the compassion would have to be in me first. You believe that? That's a hard one to get used to because you want to say, well, anyone would have felt. And the answer is no, not anyone would have felt. It's not true. Now, does this mean that the other person isn't obnoxious or isn't at fault? Now, I know that you and I don't have any obnoxious qualities, but there are people in the world who do, right? And you say, oh, no, that doesn't mean that at all. The other person might be obnoxious, but your reaction is still your responsibility. Even though the other person's obnoxious, the other person is the newsman who's so mean and testy. It's up to you now. How you react is your responsibility. If you react immaturely, if someone cuts you off in traffic and you say, I'm going to get them at the next red light, and give them a 75-pound look, you menace, you know, you are reacting the way that person did. You're going to cut that person off now because that person cut you off. You're letting the other person decide how you're going to act. So, or if you react angrily, you say, oh, that person cut me off, how rude. Maybe. But the point is, your reaction is still your responsibility. Your reaction still comes out of something in you. Do you believe that? Do you? Okay. Then we can go on. Because I make my class underline this sentence. Growth begins where blaming ends. Growth begins where blaming ends. That as long as you are a blamer, you're never going to grow up to your full stature. If you blame people, well, you did this, and you made me this, and this place does this to me, and no, the answer is none of the above. None of the above. The fault, dear Brutus, is not with our stars, but something in ourselves. It explains this reaction. And I think this is true, that you've got to assume that responsibility in order to get to know yourself. Now, I think this is true also, that it is the way you get to learn who you are. Did you know this? I'm not an alcoholic, but I'm still completing my qualifications. But an alcoholic or a drug addict is out of touch with reality. And I had a boy at school who was a senior, and he became first a drug addict, and then to get out of a drug addiction, he got into alcoholism. He became an alcoholic. And he had cleaned up all of his acts by the time he was a senior. But he used to say strange things to me. And one of the strange things that he said one day was, you know, don't you, that women are more cruel than men? I said, no, I didn't know that. Is that true? Oh, yes, he said, everybody knows that's true. And I said, I didn't know it was true. So not everybody knew if I didn't know. And then he would say, you got to remember, I didn't have an adolescence. Because he was, and I said, yeah, you're right, you didn't have an adolescence. Well, why? Because he was always in some drug, narcotic haze. He was always in some alcoholic haze. So he never really was in contact with reality. He didn't grow up. He was still, in an adult body, a child walking around, making these stupid judgments like women are more cruel than men. Now, what I think is that at the end of the drug addiction or the alcoholism, the famous 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are kind of a crash course in maturity. You go through them and through them and through them in order to make up what you've missed, in order to make up for the maturity you've missed out on. Now, I would like to compare, if I may, a blamer to an alcoholic. When you stop blaming, while you're blaming, you're not in touch with reality. It really wasn't you that made me angry. It was something in me, something that goes back in my life. Why did I become angry? Why wasn't I reacting in a different way? It's because of something in me, and I have to face that. And if I do face that, I will get to know myself. Why did I react angrily? This is true, I think, that you will learn about yourself only if you assume full responsibility for all your emotions. And that's the point of getting in touch with your emotions, is to learn about yourself. You know, I took a physical at Loyola's hospital. And you take all the physical examinations one week, and the next week you go back and the doctor interprets your tests. And this doctor was interpreting my tests. And every time he knitted his eyebrows, I jumped into his lap. What, doctor? Tell me the truth. Lay it on me. What is it? And at one point he said, uh-oh, and I said, what? And he said, I can't read the other doctor's writing. Down, Fang, down. And driving home, I said to myself, why did I react that way? Now, what a blamer does, and I'm trying not to be a blamer, because I really do believe they're out of touch with reality. A blamer would have said, well, that doctor, he didn't have a bedside manner. Well, if he had had a bedside manner, I would have been right in the answer. No. What were you nervous about? What was the emotion under your nervousness? And you know what it was? At least I think, as much as I can psychoanalyze myself, it was fear. Fear of what? Fear that he would tell me I had something terminal. Fear of death. You're afraid of death. You're a priest. You're afraid of death? Yep. I'm afraid to die. What are you afraid of in death? I asked myself in the 30-mile trip home. I said, I'm not afraid that no one will be there. Although I did tell Jesus one time, you better be there, man. I have gambled everything on you. I'm afraid that the Lord would say, you've been a big phony. You know, some people thought you were real. They really did. And I got in touch with the pervasive fear in my life, which is of not being real, not being who I really am. And so I think that it's most important to assume that my fear, whatever it is, my anger, whatever emotion comes out of me, comes out of something in me. And I will get to know myself if I get in touch with that fear. And don't blame it on someone else. Don't blame it on the doctor who didn't have a bedside manner. Blame it or trace it back to its roots in you. You see this constantly in other people. I had a boy in class who was a nice-looking kid, but he had a constipated look on his face all the time. And I asked him about it, and he said, you see, I'm adopted. And he said, my adoptive parents never told me this, but I always presumed that if I ever displeased them, they would send me back to the orphanage. And I looked at his face again, and I thought, that is the look. He's saying, are you going to send me back to the orphanage? And I thought, everything that comes up in us comes out of something in our past. And we have to assume full responsibility, not only for our actions, but also for our emotions in order to know ourselves. And here is my friend Loretta Brady to teach you or to exercise you in full responsibility. Loretta?
I thought maybe that we could practice a little bit of it in terms of taking full responsibility. And I'll start the practice and then hand it off to you toward the end. To take full responsibility for my feelings, first of all, I have to get in touch with them. So I would like to tell you a story of something that happened to me and then go from there in terms of the feelings I had about it. It started out to be a wonderful story, a piece of life. My sister, who I enjoy a lot, and her daughter came to visit me in Chicago, and we were planning our week, what we were going to do the next day and the arrangements we had to make. And the two of them wanted to go somewhere together, and so they needed to use my car. But I had a meeting that I had to go to, one of those, you've got to be here, we're counting on everyone. And so I needed a car. So I called a friend of mine and asked if I could borrow his car. Fine, great, come on over tonight and pick it up, and then you just park it at your place and it'll be ready for you in the morning. So I went ahead and did that. And I parked the car about a block away from where I live, and everything was fine, and we all got up in the morning and got ready to leave. And my sister and her niece decided to drive me, using my car, drive me around the block over to get the other car, which they did, and we drove around the block, and there was no car. There was no car on the whole street that belonged to anybody. All the cars were gone. And I just had this sinking feeling like, oh my gosh, I know what this is. This is street cleaning and they tow cars, but I don't live on this street, so I didn't know this was the day. And the whole thing went right through my mind, and of course I thought, well, how would I know? And then I look, and of course on every single tree there was this do not park, you know, car towing tomorrow. But it was dark when I came in at night, so I didn't see that at all. But the whole day sort of flashed before my mind. I have this meeting, they want to go there, we have one car, the other one's in the police tow lot, oh my gosh. And so we proceeded to spend the rest of the morning and part of the afternoon unraveling it, because it wasn't all that simple. We went to the police station, not too far away. They drove me over, and the police said, well, fine, we understand, but you can't get this car out because it's not yours. I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I borrowed it. I have no ownership claim to it at all. So I had to go get my friend at work to leave work to come, because I couldn't even borrow papers. I had to bring the owner in person to the police station to claim his car, and then we got the car. Well, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon when this whole saga ended, okay? Now, before I go on and tell you what was going on inside me, let me ask you, as you listen to that story, what did you think, or how did you feel, assuming you were in the story? That story happened to you. How do you feel? How would you feel if that were your story? Anybody have a sense of how they would feel if that were happening to them? Yes.
I think first I probably would have panicked, then I would have been very angry with everybody around me, then I would have been angry with myself.
All right. Steve has a few emotions for us. Anger, panic. Okay. Anyone else? How would you have felt?
I think I would feel very frustrated
Okay.
because I like for things to go as they're planned.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Rose. Frustrated. Anyone else with a different kind of feeling that came?
I think I'd have been mortified to think I had caused all that trouble for that man.
Oh, all right. Mortified. Different kind of feeling here. Yes.
I'm always feeling stupid. I think I would have felt stupid that I hadn't checked better, I guess. Something like
Okay.
that.
All right. I want to underline one thing that Gwen said. I'm always feeling stupid, so I would have felt stupid. And I'll get back to that later. It's like she owns that emotion, apparently. Anyone else with even a different feeling?
I would have felt helpless because I like feeling in control, and I would have felt helpless, and as a result of that, my frustration and then my anger with others until I finally get around to owning that responsibility for myself.
Okay.
But I'd have to go through all those other things.
Okay. A rainbow of feelings. Okay. Anyone else? Other feelings? We have anger, frustration, stupidity.
I would have felt sorry for the man because he was totally innocent. And he all of a sudden gets a call, you have to come down and get your car out of the pound. I mean, oh, poor guy. Sorry.
Okay. Now, but I want to ask you, if he was innocent, was I guilty? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You would have felt very sorry for inconveniencing that person and making them have to change all their day and everything? Okay. Anyone else? Another kind of feeling?
I think I would have felt responsible for the people that I was supposed to be in contact with. And then as time went on, I think I would have felt that I'd done all I could to recognize the situation and be satisfied with it.
Okay. When you feel that you should be responsible and you're not able to come through, as you said, I would have felt responsible, what kind of emotional reaction do you have when you can't come through on responsibility?
Nervous.
Nervous? Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks. Any other feelings, emotional reactions that you had, even as you listened to my story?
I would have felt a need to get to that meeting. I would have wanted to take a taxi and get there to solve that particular part of the problem. But then there would be a lot of anxiety about the car still being in the pound and the need for this friend to go get his car out of the pound that was really my responsibility for the car being there, but it wouldn't help for me to be there. But I'd feel guilty if I weren't there and did get a taxi. So there'd
What
be
would you feel when you said, I would have felt a need to get to the meeting? What kind of emotion goes with that?
the responsibility of, that's my commitment, to be there.
And how do
and a
you
lot of
feel when you have a
anxiety.
commitment to something and you can't complete it?
A lot of anxiety.
Okay, so you've got anxiety and guilt and frustration. This was going to be one of your worst days. Aren't you glad it was mine and not yours? Okay, those are just some feelings within the room. Now, my feeling. I'm such a nice person. I'm such a good friend. I'm such a helpful sister. Why did this happen to me? I felt self-pity. To me, one of the ugliest, sappiest emotions, but it was my emotion. I didn't feel anger or guilt. I just felt self-pity because when I traced back to my attitude, which is the second piece, I found out why. But now to go back to what you said, Gwen, if you own stupidity, I found out that I own self-pity when things go wrong. Because first I accept the responsibility. That was my emotion. That was how I felt. Oh, it's embarrassing to even say I felt self-pity. But it was my emotion, and I accept the responsibility for it. And then I want to ask the next question. why that feeling? You know, why was yours frustration or yours anger and yours self-pity, or mine self-pity and your guilt? Why that emotion? Why is stupidity? Why do you have a mortgage on stupidity, you know? Because of our attitudes. There's a certain attitude we have about ourselves or life or situations that causes that feeling to come forth. And so I accepted the feeling of self-pity and then began to trace it back to, why self-pity? What's in me that I would feel that in reaction? And I came upon something that was even worse to find than self-pity, and that was this attitude I have that if I do everything that people expect of me, if I provide you with a car and not inconvenience you and obey the police laws and get to meetings where people want me to be, then nothing bad should ever happen to me. Nothing bad should ever happen to me if I do what is expected of me. And if it does, then, you know, poor me, I did everything I was expected to do. Why did this egg fall from the sky? Which is completely irrational because things happen. So then I also have to accept the attitude. And of course, begin to change that attitude, begin to let some fresh air in and take a look at life as it really exists, not life as the way I would like it to be, as you said. So the example then, I hope, brings you full circle in terms of, as events happen in your life, listen to your feelings, the emotional reactions that you have. And even if you want to say, ooh, I hate that, it's your emotional reaction, it's yours, accept it, and then use it to help you trace back to the attitude behind it. Why do you look at life that way? What's the attitude behind it that causes that feeling? And if you do that in situations, one after another, you will really get to know yourself and be well on the way to taking full responsibility for who you are. One little footnote I'd like to say, and I hope you appreciate the richness of feelings here. All those feelings were different feelings. And your feelings were coming out of your attitudes. They weren't coming from my attitude because mine was a completely different attitude and therefore a completely different feeling. But if each of us gets in touch with ourselves, then we can begin to accept ourselves and take full responsibility for who we are. In the next segment, John's going to talk about the importance of relaxation, nourishment, and exercise in our daily lives. Thank you.